It's been said that there's no rest for the wicked. Some can be said for the virtuous. It was Christmas Eve, 2031, in the evening, and the evening so meek and so mild that not even jailbirds bothered to sing. It's in times like these, times of peace and stillness, where even the faintest whispers of chaos can be found loud enough to break glass. But this was no whisper. It was weeping, a shrill and mournful weeping, coming from the sliding glass door, now ajar, hazed with frost set against the starry night sky, and a box between those doors stood a woman, face red, eyes wide, cheeks wet from the smears of tears, and probably holding back more. Scoot Schutz saw her from across the broad and dingy apartment of the North Hill Police. Maybe he felt something compassion, perhaps, or more likely, this was but another case that has demanded his attention, a distraction at best. Either way, she noticed him, and he and her. "Take a seat," Detective Schwartz said, scooting back in the middle chair and going through the motions again. At this point, his career is completely desensitized to enervated, jittering mass of a woman slumped over in the chair. She wasn't at first. She sat. "Why don't you tell me what's going on, miss?" Schutz lifted his head for a response. "I think my daughter's been abducted," the woman finally said, with a feint of breath, whose eyes clenched shut on reality, even though there was no escaping it. "And when did she go missing?" Schutz said, gruffly said as he took another swig of coffee, speckled with cream. "Tonight," the woman weakly said. Schutz leaned back and raked his fingers through his jumbled hair, scratching the dry scalp beneath. "Well, what do you know any kind who would want to kidnap your daughter?" "No," the mother said, watching her own foot drag along the mangy carpet. "Can you tell me a little bit more about what happened? I'm in the dark here." She finally lifted her eyes, bloodshot and dilated, as she nervously spoke. "I'm not sure I know myself," she said. "Try me," Schwartz briefly murmured. The woman leaned forward, waddling her fingers into balls that anchored onto his desk. With a sigh, she spoke. "We had gone to see the Christmas lights. You know Pinewood Park on 111th? "I'm familiar," Schwartz replied. "They had some lights in the park. We were driving by and my daughter saw Rudolph. She loves Rudolph, so we pulled in and went to see him." "And then what happened?" Schwartz asked, leaning in. "Then we got separated. She had to go to potty, so we stopped at the public access bathroom. She was in the stall next to mine, and I told her to wash her hands when she was done. I heard the sink running and told her to wait outside for Mommy. But when I opened the stall door, she was gone," the woman sniffled. "And you think someone abducted her?" Schwartz asked. The woman nodded softly with a feeble shiver. "I figured she ran off to see Rudolph. When I got to Rudolph's lights, I didn't see her. I called her for her, but when she didn't answer, I started looking. I looked for 3 hours and then came here." Schwartz leaned forward with a click of the pen, scribbling some illegible notes into a paper pad, a formality to him, hope for her. "Sometimes, miss, kids just gotta sneak off." Schwartz cleared his raspy throat. "There's a high possibility that your daughter is safe. Afraid, but safe." The woman was reluctant and shook her head before he could finish the last word. "She wouldn't look up and leave us like that. She's never done that." "Kids are funny like that, miss." The woman clenched her bottom lip with the skin of her teeth. "Do you have kids?" Schultz blinked tightly. "No, I don't." "Then how would you know?" the woman said sharply through her wild eyes. "Well," Schultz began, "because I don't think you have a damn idea about how I feel right now." Schwartz's wide eyes narrowed, leaning forward with a sigh, pulling himself towards the woman by the bones in the elbows. "Madam, last month," Schwartz slowly hawked, "I had dazed a 5-year-old girl approach in my squad car. She said to me that her mommy was flying up in the apartment, and she couldn't get down. I asked her, flying like a bird, and she said no. I said, like a balloon, and she said yes, and she told me to show her where her mommy was." The woman swallowed. Schwartz's eyes finally softened. before hardening up again. The mother hung herself from the ceiling fan in their bedroom. The little girl thought she was flying, Schultz huffed. Kids are funny like that. The woman pushed herself back in the middle chair before replying, "And what the hell is that supposed to mean?" "It means kids are unreliable. I'm not saying she was abducted, but I'm just not ruling out the possibilities. Kids, especially young ones, like to run off. We'll put a 1057 out on her, and we'll try and see if the park has any cameras. Might be able to take some time given the holiday. Maybe we'll find someone responsible for what happened. Or maybe someone who saw what did. Do you have a picture of your daughter, miss?" The woman looked down, retrieving her purse, and sliding a wallet within its depths. A small piece of paper caught her eye, tugging at the tears from behind it. She handed the photo over. "Her name's Cassidy." Detective Schultz looked down. The image of the black-haired girl smiled brightly at him. The same innocence they always shared was tucked away in their tiny eyes. "Detective?" The woman's voice shook Schultz out of his gaze, his eyes jolting to meet hers. "What happened to that little girl in your story?" Schultz pushed himself back, scraping the metal chair along the floor, as he stood over his desk, arms crossed as he licked his lips. "She was placed into foster care." The woman nodded silently as Schultz breezed past her. He stopped inside. "You're right. I don't know how you feel, but if I did, I wouldn't be doing this job." There were cameras in that park, 6 to be exact. One at the front gate, one at the back, and 4 scattered about on those 2 being the front of the restroom areas. You could see her, too, through the cameras had been better Christmases. There was no mistaking bundling up the congregation of pixels as the form of the little girl. Schultz watched as Cassidy left the bathroom, frisking down the icy path towards the Christmas lights. Camera 4 captured the whole thing. About halfway down the beaten path, Cassidy stopped and turned her little body to see a face radiating the light just off screen, and she let out of the frame. The light was so bright at this point, Cassidy was but a shadow in its presence. Her shadow crept towards the light slowly, before scurrying towards it. As Cassidy exited the frame, the light disappeared. All 5 of the other cameras captured from different areas, making the source of the light indiscernible. The only other coverage of Cassidy's disappearance was on camera 3, which showed the event from the opposite direction. Cassidy was noticeable from the front now, still obscured by the light, in addition to an elderly couple sitting on a nearby bench, also bleached out from the radiating beam. Again, like before, Cassidy traveled towards the light source, and with the glow cutting off almost immediately, the elderly couple watched the entire ordeal, looking at one another as the light rapidly dissipated. Something might have been said between them, but no audio was captured on the cameras. From the timestamp of 8:47 p.m., when Cassidy exited out of the left side of the frame, her presence was not seen again as on any cameras. About 2 minutes after the light vanished, the figure of Cassidy's mom darting down the path is visible on both cameras 3 and 4. Schultz gulped down another swig of coffee, watching the disheartened mother panic for her missing kid. She then paused the tape. "Eddie?" the detective called out, summoning the younger man no older than 23. "Is this all we got?" Schultz asked, gesturing down towards the screen. "Yes, Mr. Schultz," the young intern murmured. "There wasn't a lot to go off of. That place is older than my grandpa. The cameras aren't ancient, I mean." Schultz then nodded his head, dismissing the young man into the same gesture. Eddie turned to face the hall, then stopped. "How was your Christmas, sir?" Schultz sighed with another gulp of the hot liquid. "Fine, kid. Just another day." "Yeah, I mean good," the young man said. Schultz tapped his desk with a worn-out knuckle. "Did you, have a good holiday?" "Yeah, it was nice. You know, being away from all this." Schultz nodded, contributing silence to the ancient office. "When you see as much shit as we do here, it is astonishing that we still have a Christmas," Schultz said with a huff. The young man nodded back politely. "Go on, kid. Thanks." Eddie walked down the hall, leaving Schultz in the company of the TV. With a yawn, Schultz followed his head into his palm, now wiping away the salty tear. Through one of those tired eyes, Schultz stared blankly back at the frozen image of the elderly couple in the corner off screen. I see if you could track down these people, Schultz said, putting out a printout of the screen on Eddie's desk. Who are they? Eddie asked. Witnesses, I think. They're my only lead, Schultz replied. I know the image looks like shit, but you're good at fixing shit, right, aren't you? Eddie nodded with a smirk. The elderly couple was bewildered by the police station. They seen another tender of matching folks, and the clean records confirmed it. This must have been their first time stepping on foot on a place like this. Thanks for coming in on such short notice, Mr. and Mrs. Deans. I haven't had to go off on this case, so I was hoping you folks might be able to help me out here. The elderly couple stared woodenly at him. Do you know why you two are here? They were quiet for a long moment, peering towards one another with trepidation. Isn't there anything for us to say? The older man finally said. About the girl. About anything. We don't know anything. What he means is, the woman interrupted, we don't know what to make of it ourselves. If we knew what happened, we could have come to you. Schultz leaned back in his chair with a creak. And you're referring to what place that took on Pinewood Park on December 24th? It was Christmas Eve. It's not hard to forget. Schultz nodded, eyes still locked in their old-timers. He was too invested to grab his coffee from the table. Did you tell anybody about the incident? No, the elder man said. Why? Schultz asked. Our children would have taken it not well, the woman piped in. They were feared it might have been put us in a home, or worse, we want to see our grandkids. I see, Schultz said, biting off a hangnail from his thumb and resting the hand onto his desk. Then why don't you tell me what happened in your own words? The couple looked at one another. After a moment hushed deliberation, the woman finally spoke up. We went to see the Christmas lights, like we always do. Pinewood isn't far from our house, and we needed fresh air anyways. We took a few laps around the park and, then when we got tired, we rested on the bench. Then we saw the young girl. I was a bit concerned when I noticed she was alone, but then we got distracted by the light, and that's when it took her. What did? The light. What do you mean? Well, she called out for something. Philo, fallow, something like that. She ran towards it and it sucked her right up. The woman trembled as she spoke, nodded her head. Schultz was in a lock on the woman now, leaning towards her for answers. What kind of light was it? The brightest, the old man chipped in. I ain't never seen a light brighter. Yes, the old woman nodded, as if comforting herself with a prayer. Such a bright light. Warm too. Very warm. It was an angel. Schultz blinked back into reality and furrowed his eyebrows, shifting towards his seat. What do you mean, angel? I mean the Lord. I saw him. Clear as day. The woman smiled under the fearful expression. The old man lowered his head, shaking it next to her. She paid no attention. That little girl, God, she was calling her home. Schultz then blinked over the old man and shot a glance from his wife to Schultz. Is that true? Schultz asked of him. The old man hesitantly walked up and swallowed his reply. That's not what I saw, he starkly chuckled. It wasn't God, it was my mother. Your mother? Schultz asked, stupefied. He didn't see it clearly, the woman said. The hell I did, Ellen. It was Marlene. We talked about this. Marty language. Don't apologize, Schultz said to the old man. I've heard plenty of shit. Marge, don't you tell me that I didn't see what I saw. I know what I saw. It was my mother. When's the last time you saw your mother? Schultz threw in. The space drastically grew quiet, and the old man reflected. She went to be with me in the Lord when he was 14, the woman said, breaking up the silence. I see, Schultz said bleakly. This isn't the first time I saw her in 64 years. She hasn't aged today, honey. The man turned to his wife, somewhat eagerly. Maybe she is an angel. A guardian angel, the woman proclaimed. Schultz rubbed the fuzz bit of his grin in his hand, letting out a deep breath. Are you claiming this little girl was abducted by an angel? Rescued, the woman replied with a hopeful smile. Rescued by an angel, love. Schultz's expression dropped when the reality of the situation dawned on him. The girl's mother would say otherwise, madam, Schultz said with a blunt expression. The woman rested her eyes on Schultz, trying to read him. Do you not believe in God or angels, detective? Schultz was a bit on the inside of his lip. I was raised Catholic, he said. That didn't answer my question. No, he said. I don't. Why not? The woman asked. Schultz took a deep breath in, holding it, leaned forward and sliding his elbow along the desk when he lowered his voice. Because last month, I saw a woman who had hung herself in front of her own daughter. The girl came to me expecting me to do something about it. All I could do was pull the rope from that goddamn fan. The girl had no family except for her deadbeat dad, and I'm pretty sure he got the custody of her. God knows what he's doing to her, and that was just last month, so no, I don't believe there is a God. If there is, he's got a lot of explaining to do for me. The woman was silent, then tilted forward. Love, that sounds like the work of the devil, not God. Schultz slowly nodded, not truly accepting what she said. Frankly, ma'am, I can't seem to tell them apart these days. Maybe that's because you were blaming the sheep that the wolves use in its clothing. Schultz nodded curiously at the old woman before sitting up on his chair. Let's save the theological debate, Schultz theoretically asked. If we could think of anything else to ask you both, we'll be in touch. Hello? Hello, Mrs. Jones, Schultz spat, clutching the ice receiver from the plastic phone. Do you have a moment? Yes, the woman quickly responded. Any news? Well, I had a talk with some old folks and they claimed they saw what happened to Cassidy. What did they say? Do they know who it is? The woman snapped sarcastically. Well, you see, it's hard to explain, Schultz swallowed. Do you know of a Philo or Fallow? Fallow, the woman said, the word balled up in her mouth. Something like that, Schultz said. The other end was quiet for a moment. What do you mean, Fado? Maybe, why? That was our dog's name, Fado. He was a King Charles Spaniel that ran away last month. Cassidy was heartbroken. I was going to get her a look-alike for Christmas. She wouldn't have known. I see. Why? What do you know about Fado? The woman I spoke to. She said Cassidy called out that name before she went missing. The line went quiet again. Do you think someone might have used a dog to kidnap Cassidy? Schultz ripped the trim of his fingernail clean off and spat out. No, that, wouldn't make sense. Unless you could call someone that knew your daughter that well. There is no way some rando would know about a dog or use it as bait of any kind. Unless Fado was here, we don't live far from the park, so it's possible. But what are the odds, ma'am? Seems very unlikely coincidence, don't you think? That line fell silent once more, but Schultz spoke up. And even if that's true, that brings us no closer to finding your daughter. The other line turned into distant sobbing. I know she's still out there, detective, the woman whimpered on the phone. I'll search for her myself if I have to. Schultz cleared his warm air in his throat. No, that won't be necessary. Then tell me when you'll find her. Schultz silently held out the phone to himself. I'll do anything I can, Miss Jones, the woman stilly responded. So will I. Miss Jones went missing 3 days later. New Year's Eve at the same park. Brutal irony. They had begun taking down the Christmas lights, but that didn't teeter the hope of the mother from searching every last nook and jungle gym for something. Anything. The missing report was listed on the pages of 7 to North Hill Herald. No one told Schultz that the woman had gone into Pinewood, but after the final word she spoke to him, her absence led him to the only place a mother like her would have gone. Another one? Oh geez, the ranger said, plopping the security tapes onto his desk, biting down on a wooden toothpick. Yeah, Schultz replied. I am leaning against the rustic doorframe. The mother of the last girl. Oh, hell, the ranger defeatedly said, with an invisible shiver. I thought this was all over. Schultz took a pause, stepping inside into the park office with a firm toothfold. What was all over? The ranger swung his head up, locking eyes with the detective. You never heard? About? Schultz frustrated asked. The missing people? I thought an officer of all folks would have known. Schultz stepped a little closer to the man, crossing his arms almost resentfully. No, it didn't enlighten me. The ranger sat up, spinning his toothpick in his teeth. I mean, it's been a couple years since all that trouble, the ranger said, scratching his head. No, it's like a little foggy, but what I remember was 3 or more people going missing at the park. Maybe more. Started with a young boy. Mom said he went to play on the playground. He didn't make it home for supper. No body was ever found. No blood, nothing. Vanished. The same thing happened to the next girl. No blood, no ripped up clothes, or nothing you would have expected from her mother was even with her. What about the cameras? Schultz asked. The folks down in your station said there was nothing sold on the tapes, so it could have been a kidnapper who lured them into his truck. Something about those messing headlights with the cameras, but they never caught anybody. What about the third victim? Schultz muttered. The ranger tapped his hat with a mournful nod. The third victim was a man who used to sit in his chair. His name was Vinnie White. God, man, family man. Vinnie thought that there was a wild animal out there. Something that was clearly eating those people or carrying them away, more likely. A bear? Schultz asked, flipping on his open notebook. Well, I don't know. Vinnie never found out. He went missing too. Schultz finished up his note, letting out an exaggerated breath. What do you think it was? You think they ran off? The ranger hung his head low with a swag of his hat. Maybe that kid, the ranger said, but not Vinnie. He had a family, a wife and 2 kids. No reason for a man to leave all that behind. I think they were taken, but don't ask me who or what did it. Schultz agreed with a faint grin, void of all joy, as he glanced back down at the scribbling pen and paper pad. You said Vinnie White? Schultz confirmed as he wrote. Vincent White, yes, the ranger replied. And the young girl's name was Bree. She was Indian, I think. I don't recall the first kid. Schultz nodded, glancing up back at the man. Oh, one final thing. You haven't seen a dog around the park, have you? A stray? No, not for the last 6 months in Pinewood. Why? No reason. Thought it was just a stupid hunch, Schultz said as he pulled himself away from the ranger. If I do, I could call you, detective. Schultz shook his head in an appreciative will. I appreciate it, but it won't be necessary, Schultz said, his eyes drifting off the window to the place where snow-covered greenery outside, turning back to face a stack of tapes resting before the ranger. The sun dipped past the horizon as the detective heaved for a satchel of tapes down towards the station. The city, draped with a blanket of fresh snow, glimmered in the moonlight above as Schultz crunched through the ice below. As Scrooge approached the apartment, he watched his shadow stretched across the brick and mortar building. He turned and, holding back a visible breath, there was a light in the distance, past a bundle of city signs and stoplights. It looked like a broken street lamp, but Schultz couldn't be sure. There was someone centered with it. He stepped forward, trying to get a better look at the tiny figure, but as soon as he did, something within him told him to stop. He squinted at the light in curiosity before shrugging off to the station, his eyes quickly adjusting the dimnesses of the nearby drabby place as the glow from the outside faded out of view. Schultz sat forward as Eddie popped a tape in from camera 3. After a curtain of static pulled away, the detective could see a familiar sight, a strip of concrete edged by the bushes and trees halfway covered in holiday lights, some removed. It didn't take long for the panic-stricken strides of Miss Jones entered the frame, before disappearing into the surrounding duskness. Just as Eddie went to fast-forward the tape, Schultz lunged forward on his chair. "Pause it!" Sludge hurled. Eddie punched the button with his fingers as Sludge walked down the TV. Pressing a finger against the static, there was an image of an elderly man, Mr. Deans, as he walked down the same path. 3 taps and still no answer. Nothing. "Hello? Mr. and Mrs. Dean? North Hill Police. It's Schultz. Detective Schultz." No response. Damn it. Schultz grabbed the knob aggressively and wiggled it open to unlock the door. He stepped back, retrieving his flashlight from his belt, waving it around with the crack of it left by the door's parting. "Mr. and Mrs. Deans? North Hill Police. We tried calling, but no one's picked up. Schultz nudged the door open with the butt of the flashlight. I just have a few more questions about Christmas Eve incident. The silence soon faded into a soft voice speaking. It wasn't on Mr. or Mrs. Dean's. It was Linus. The TV, which was left to illuminate the empty couch, played a rerun of the Charlie Brown Christmas. As Schultz stepped into the space, the air was chilled as the night. Lights, please, Linus echoed from the box television. Sludge creeped down the apartment, narrowing the living quarters, calling out for the elderly couple. Only Linus replied, and no lo angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around about them. And they were afraid, and the angel said unto them, Fear not. Schultz paused the bedroom door open, with a sharp squeal, aiming the flashlight at the vacant bed, peering through the surrounding darkness. For you unborn this day, on the day of the David, a Savior, which was Christ the Lord. The window was wide open, swallowing the sleepy city within it. The flashlight's quivering beam, in collapsing the square window, grew smaller as Schultz approached the opening, poking his head outside into the night sky and looking down at the street below. Nothing. And that's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. The only evidence leading to the whereabouts of Mr. and Mrs. Dean's was found by an answering machine of Kimberly Bassett, tenant of suite 236, adjacent neighbor to the Deans, who had joined a Bible study with Miss Deans 2 miles prior to their disappearance. Kim, this is Ellen. I know it's late, but I was wondering if you have heard from Paul or seen him within the last few hours. He never returned home from, well, wherever he was. If you could call me. There was silence on the line until, Oh, Kim, I'm so sorry, Paul's here. After that, the line went dead. Wiz said she missed the initial phone call. The ringing from Miss Dean's did awaken Kimberly Bassett in the small hours of the morning. Before she listened to the answering machine, Kimberly claimed that the apartment suddenly became dark. And then what happened? Schultz snappily asked. And then I put my robe on and went next door. Did anyone answer? Schultz clicked, biting the lip of his pen. No, Kimberly said. I tried another time, but it was awfully late, and I didn't want to disturb anyone. Schultz nodded. Where were you aware that the front door was unlocked? If I was, Kimberly said with crossed arms, I would have gone in. I see, Schultz nodded. And when did all this occur? Maybe 4 or 5 days ago. Schultz nodded as he jotted down the note into his pad. Is there a reason you decided not to report the Deans missing? Kimberly looked up, petrified for blame for their disappearance. Oh, I didn't know they went missing at that time. At least I figured they were out of town due to the New Year, Ellen said. As she and Paul had grandchildren, I guess I just figured that they were with them. I see, Schultz once again muttered, folding up his notepad. Well, in the future, if you should hear or see anything out of the ordinary, don't be afraid to call us. Schultz nodded a goodbye at the woman, pivoting towards the door. Well, there's one thing out of the ordinary. And what is that? Schultz said, turning to face the woman once more. They had been fighting, Alan, and Paul did something about his mother. It was strange because she had died years ago, before I knew them. But whatever they were saying got heated. These walls are thin. I think Paul stormed out, and that's why he didn't come home. Schultz stared off at the woman. He swallowed, nodding towards his pad. I see. There you go, Schultz said, placing the stack of tapes on the ranger's desk. The ranger looked up from the forlorn detective, whose eyes hung over the solemn face. You get what you needed out of them? Schultz nodded in reply. Good. You, need of anything else, partner? You're looking awfully grim. I'm fine, Schultz said curtly. I'm just ready to catch that son of a bitch. Aren't we all? The ranger said. Vinny would have respected the hell out of you, and I do too. Schultz again nodded towards the ranger, smiling up again. You don't know anything about strange lights around here, do you? Lights? What's this, another one of your haunches? The ranger laughed. Maybe, Schultz replied. Have you? The ranger licked his lips, searching the back of his mind. We've had a couple of complaints, yeah, People were saying that they've seen weird stuff around here is common, though. What do you mean weird? I don't know. Bigfoot, aliens, the typical. How about predators? Oh, sure, them too. We've seen them occasionally of nasty critters. Snakes, lizards, and what have ya. Any that glow? What, like fireflies? The ranger chuckled. Schultz shook his head, closing the open notebook and clicking his tongue. Never mind. You, have a good night, Ranger. You too, the ranger said confusedly. Schultz trudged through the slushy ice that coated the concrete path, the same path taken by most of the ones on Pinewood Park. He then stood like a glacier, erected from the ice, completely still, breathing in the wistful lung of the frigid air and exhaling moments worth of clarity, glancing up at the pathway, light and letting the light soak in amidst the orange-blue sky. They all saw something different, Schultz mouthed to himself, realizing whatever is hidden in the light, allured to the missing itself. Allure, Schultz drawled. Allure. Schultz carried himself through the snow towards the empty wooden bench, plopping down in heavy contemplation. Well, that makes something alluring, doesn't it, though? He asked to himself. He nodded. Something that we all pretty much want, he mumbled, his eyes shifting in their sockets. He flipped open his notepaper pad and his finger pressing against the scribbled words as it dragged past the illegible chunks of text. It stopped, Schultz's eyes darting away through the trees and bushes, squinting with wariness around them, then back to the page. Hello? Miss Anand? Schultz spat into the receiver of the park payphone. Yes, who's this? Miss Anand said in a weary, hushed voice. You don't know me. My name is Detective Schultz. I work for the North Hill Police Department. What about is this about Bree? The woman hastily said. Yes, well, sort of. I wondered if I could ask you something the night your daughter vanished. Okay, the woman's voice said in her undertone uncertain. The night she vanished, were you there, correct? Pinewood Park? Yes, I told the police already. Doesn't matter, ma'am. Have you seen her since? The line remained silent. Ma'am, sultily still he said. I believe you. Have you seen Bree? Yes. Schultz froze. Somehow the answer he wasn't the one to hear. Was she in the light? Schultz said. He held his breath for the answer. Yes, it's happening again, the woman said in a shaky voice. I think so. Listen, when you saw your daughter, where was it? And Miss Anna shuddered, her eyes dashing towards the icy windows, facing the backyard, a patchy green and white stretch that met with a white fence, blanking on the outskirts of the thick forest. My backyard, she trembled. It was 2 days after Bree went missing. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard my girl crying. And you're sure it was Bree? Schultz asked. Officer, Anand asserted, with her held-back emotions. She's my daughter. I know her voice. I know her cry. Schultz agreed with the woman before continuing. So when you saw her, did you approach her? Schultz asked. No, Miss Anand said. I wanted to so badly, but I knew whatever that was, it wasn't my daughter. How did you know? I saw her from a few ways off. She was wailing for me, crying. I opened the back door to run to her, but then I noticed that light again, and the same one from the park. It was all around her. So you did see the light at the park? Schultz asked, holding the phone ever so tightly in the vein might have just popped. Yes, the woman said without hesitation. I saw Bree run into it with open arms. I couldn't stop her. The detective listened to the mother's sniffles collapse into tears. Sorry, she said. Don't apologize, Schultz responded, waiting for Miss Anand to calm down. What did you see in the light in the first time? And Miss Anand regained her composure with the apprehension. You wouldn't believe it, but somehow as my daughter, my first daughter before Bree. I see. No, you don't understand. I miscarried. She died in the womb. Yet this was a fully formed girl. Somehow I know it was her. I hoped it was, but how could have Bree known? Clutching his teeth, Schultz looked around the vacant park, the sunlight fading into the horizon for the trees, and took a sigh. And Miss Anne, I have suspicion that you think Bree might have something you didn't when you looked into that light. What do you mean, officer? The woman said, her voice parting with confused lips. I mean, that light is like a lure. Whatever you want to see and it allows to show you, I think, Schultz stammered. I think whatever took your daughter was like an angeler. An angeler? I know it sounds foolish, but all you people have seen that damn thing. Whatever you want to call it. Have you seen it? Miss Anna replied. Not yet, Schultz said. Then I suggest you watch for yourself, officer. Schultz nodded against the phone. Thanks. And with that, he hung up. The park brushed its chilly air against Schultz's neck, causing him to turn from the payphone, heart pumping despite the empty sidewalks. The place felt very much alive, as much as undetectable predator breathes over the shoulders of its prey. He knew he was being watched, and now, regardless of rhyme or reason, the Angeler, as he now called it, it was still in this damn place, as far as he knew at least. Thickets of trees obscured from the surrounding sleepy city, making Pinewood appear more far remote than usual. And as the sun set on late January evening, a faint glimmer of radiant light from the depths of those very thickets grew louder. Hurtling towards the beckoning invitation to the Schultz, he went. Eventually, as soon as the illumination lit the park halfway, was merely gone behind him. The glow of the light was finally nearing. Just a few more trees. Schultz stopped, looking up at the past shadow snow-covered evergreens into the night sky, perhaps wishing a silent prayer, although Schultz was not the one for praying. His footsteps along the icy trail had grown mute in comparison to the beating of his heart, which had now beat in its drum-like chant through the entire park. That is, until it skipped for a moment, not at the light, but at the little shadow cast, the silhouette of a young girl. It was the same black hair, the same small eyes, the same innocence tucked away within them. It could have been that girl Cassidy or any of the others. For all he knew, shadows of hope illuminated through the light of hopelessness. "What do you want?" Schultz said in a shrill voice, his eyes squinting at the brightness before him. "Officer," a tiny voice said, "please help me. I'm so scared. I can't find Mommy." Schultz pushed a tear across his face. He had forgotten what it felt like. "You're not the little girl, are you?" he said firmly. "Sir, please." The little girl squealed. "You're not the damn girl. What are you?" he yelled, closing his eyes. He clenched them so tightly that the heat of the light vanished from before him. He couldn't tell whether they were open or shut now, because of the darkness permeated his vision, rubbing his fingers against his damp eyelids. The color around him slowly faded into view. Then the twigs snapped from behind him. The glow returned, pushing its way through the tree line. He turned his face to sound, running after it. "Where the hell are they?" he shouted with puffing breaths. The sound of scampering appendages darted through the darkness before him, and he shoved his hand into his coat, retrieving the firearm he had wanted to use. The Angeler, whatever type of vile creature it was, let out a hiss of terror as Schultz passed through the snapping branches. Dangling just below, the lure shone brightly in the darkness. It was a perfect aiding of the creature towards its escape, yet at the same time perfect target. The gunshots ricocheted through the park, leaving nothing but silence in their place. Then the sound of a limp body falling echoed through the trees, dampened by the snow. Schultz bent down, snapping another stick in the process, in order to get a better look at the thing, which was still illuminated by its own light. It was scaly, massive appendages, all attached to the anchoring mandibles that hung against the dirt, branching away from its body with the stretch of a long, finger-like spine. The glow of the Angeler's light dimmed, its eyes now lifeless. They were round, pearly white, pierced through Schultz's gaze, and that gaze, for the first time in a long time, grew into a grin, one of actual joy, watching the prey of the innocent die before him. This was all he ever wanted. Schultz proudly stood in front of the creature's light, fading into nothing. The detective's eyes then flushed in horror as he stared down at his shadow, cast by a looming overhead light as it stretched along the ground. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.